Welcome to another episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch, being joined by Devin, Hasson, and David Wolman. It is 2 o'clock on a Wednesday, and gentlemen, we're here to preview some of the marquee matchups in our coverage area for the first round of the high school football playoffs in classes 5A and 6A. And as per usual, middle of the week, that means starting with our reader-voted game of the week. So, again, a big thanks to everybody who went to our website, starlocalmedia.com, to vote on our 5-game poll this week. Our game of the week, we're going to be headed out to Class 6A, Division I. You narrow the scope all the way out to Max Goldsmith Stadium out in Louisville for the site of a bi-district matchup between the Louisville Fighting Farmers and the McKinney Boyd Broncos. Two teams that have a bit of familiarity with one another over the years. This is actually the 9th straight year that these teams will have played. You know, in the past 8 meetings, some have been in district play, some non-district, but obviously these two typically find their way onto one another's schedule. This is the first ever playoff meeting between these two schools, though, and a meeting between two teams with very, very different stylistic profiles for a chance to advance to the second round. So, McKinney Boyd and Louisville is the game of the week. So let's break it down as we do every week for our game of the week. Let's start with McKinney Boyd, a team that one of the nice little feel good stories as far as a team snapping a fairly lengthy playoff drought by their standards. This is the first time since 2014 that Boyd is back in the playoffs. And when you look at just the way that their season materialized, it's kind of nice just how things have kind of rounded into form for them at just the perfect time. I mean, it was a team that really had a tough time generating a whole lot of momentum, especially on offense to begin the season. They started off the year 0-3. They got shut out by Rockwall Heath 38-0. They were able to get that first win in overtime fashion, the rare 14-7 overtime victory against Trophy Club Byron Nelson in their non-district finale. And that was actually kind of the game that began a bit of a kind of the trickle-down effect as far as what this Boyd team became, especially on offense. So it was that game against Nelson where their current quarterback, Ryan Shackleton, who I believe is just a sophomore, that was his first start. Initially he was thrust into duty due to an injury to their initial starter, Carter Whitefield. Carter has since been kind of dispersed elsewhere within the offense as one of their top skill position players. Functions as a running back and a wide receiver. Obviously, even though he was injured at the time, his athleticism is still such a force for that offense that they still found a way to utilize him, and he's been very effective in whatever role he's been used as. He has 8 total touchdowns, rushing and receiving, and that's the most of any skill player on the Broncos. So with Shackleton getting more and more comfortable by the start, Whitefield having acclimated to his new role, the offense has picked it up a little bit, from that difficult start to the season. Boyd's offense, they totaled, not averaged, but totaled just 33 points in non-district play. And they've at least were able to up that average to 20.6 points per game, during district and whatnot. In addition to Whitefield, the backfield, it is the definition of a committee when you look at the way that their rushing production has manifested this season. They don't have a running back that has over 400 yards, but they have 4 running backs that have at least 275. And, Ellis Patterson, Peyton Shaw, Jay Thompson, and then, of course, the aforementioned Carter Whitefield. But the story with this team, pretty much all season, though, has been the steadiness of that defense. A unit that has averaged, just over 20.5 points per game. We've talked at length about how strong they are at linebacker with Matteo Bianchi, who's been one of the breakout stars in the area. On defense, you have Ethan Weslowski. He had a big pick 6 last week against Prosper. Jimmy Fex, who is the defensive newcomer of the year in District 9 6A last season. Luke Reber is another name to watch at linebacker. They use a lot of two-way guys in the secondary, Caden Park and Peyton Shaw. Park doubles as a wide receiver on offense. Peyton Shaw has been used, as we mentioned, as one of their top rushers. It's a unit that it's certainly, despite the raw numbers, they've certainly shown well, at least, in parts against, some of the more top-end offenses on their schedule, especially in district play. Against Allen, they held Allen to just 21 points through 3 quarters. Against Guyer only had 3 points at halftime. Against Boyd, only 10 points through 3 quarters. And then, their statement game, obviously, looking beyond that overtime win against Nelson was actually the following week against Denton Braswell, a Braswell team that came in just averaging all sorts of just video game numbers on offense, and then they only scored 12 against Boyd in a 42-12 victory that was kind of the coming out party for this McKinney Boyd team, and they've since been able to parlay it into a 4-6 record, a 3-3 mark in district play. This is again their first playoff appearance since 2014, and yeah, I mean it's a team that certainly has a very, very different means to victory from Louisville, but nevertheless, though, a team that's back in the playoffs for the first time in quite some time, and head coach Joe McBride's second year with the program. So David, Devin, what do we kind of make just as far as what McKinney Boyd has brought to the table, and just how are you guys feeling about them heading into this matchup?
I'm feeling pretty good about their defense. Like you said, like this is a meeting of like shut down defense versus high flying offense. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they say defense wins championships, and
that is true. That is the cliche.
I mean, this could be a perfect game for that to happen. Mm-hmm. And obviously you mentioned Matteo Bianchi, who's committed to Navy, and just all the stats that he's put up this year, but the way that they shut down Denton Braswell to hold them just to 12 points with all the talent that they have on their team.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's the same Braswell team that beat Prosper.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So,
that shellacked Prosper at that.
Yeah. So, McKinney Boyd, even though they have a 4-6 record, they've been battle tested. Mm-hmm. They beat Braswell, then they've had that. They played Prosper, they've played Allen, they've played Denton Guyer. All of them, some of the top teams in the state right there. So this is a chance to show, hey, our record might not indicate how good we actually are. Mm-hmm. And this is a game that you take a look at the way that Louisville has played against some teams this year, like the way they struggled against Plano West.
For sure.
And Plano West, they play, look how good the defense, they play. That's what they hold their hat on, is good defense.
No doubt.
You hold defense, take time off the clock. This seems like the perfect, kind of case for that. They can play maybe the same kind of card that Plano West showed against Louisville. So just rely on that running back by committee, and just, limit the number of, times that Louisville is able to get in on offense.
In addition with Louisville, obviously, you always start with the offense, Devin, but as you kind of had noted, Louisville's defense has started to turn a bit of a corner of late. Obviously the raw numbers won't grade out to the caliber of Boyd's, but it's certainly a unit that is playing, at least over the past few weeks, a far more inspired brand of football.
Yeah, I think so. Just when you kind of look at it, taking the Marcus game out of the equation,
no doubt.
They kind of got away from him. But 21 against Flower Mound, 14 against Coppell, 18 against Hebron, and sometimes in these games, especially when they're blowouts, which all three of these games, basically were, you get those late garbage touchdowns that kind of inflates. They're able to post those numbers, through 4 quarters when they're in control. So that's certainly. That's a positive sign for Louisville, just in terms of where they were early in the season. But, the spotlight as far as Louisville is concerned is on the other side of the ball. Yeah,
Louisville coming into this one was a 6-3 record, 4-2 in district play. This is their third straight playoff appearance. You would actually have to go back to from 1999 to 2001 for the last time this program strung together 3 straight years of postseason berths. And, from the get-go, even back before the season started and we were previewing what we thought could be the top offenses in our coverage area, Louisville was one of the first names that came to mind just because of the continuity that they had at the skill positions with Taylor Green, their quarterback, Damian Martinez, the running back, the offensive newcomer of the year in 6XA last season, and then the 1-2 punch at wide receiver with Isaiah Stevens and Armani Winfield. And in some ways, honestly, this unit might have exceeded expectations with what they've done. it is absurd how, especially since that game against Plano West, the level that they've gone up to. On the year, the offense is averaging 541.1 yards per game, just a shade under 47 points per game. Taylor Green, 2,400 passing yards. This is how insane this district was this year. He's number 6 in the area in passing yardage, but was number 3 in District 6XA with the efforts of Garrett Nussmeyer of Marcus and Nick Evers of Flower Mound. That was quite the offensive district. 23 passing touchdowns for Taylor, 6 interceptions. He did add 633 rushing yards and 7 more touchdowns on the ground. Damian Martinez was probably the biggest revelation of all. He had had a nice little breakout campaign last year. I don't know if anybody outside that program saw him leading the Metroplex in rushing yardage, and really, like, not by a hair, but just, I mean, it's insane. So he right now he's at 1,631 yards, 25 touchdowns in just 9 games played. Again, number 1 in the area in rushing yardage. He finished 181 yards ahead of second place, who's Lake Highlands' Noel Whitehead, part of that explosive offense with the Wildcats. Lake Highlands played 10 games, so that's just to kind of just put into perspective just the kind of year that Martinez had, playing 1 game fewer and still finishing almost 200 yards ahead of the pack. What a year for him. Out at receiver, I mean, Isaiah Stevens leads the area in receiving yardage right now. He's got 1,049 yards, 13 touchdowns. Both those marks are tied for tops in the area. Armani Winfield, one of the top recruits in the area at the wide receiver position, 564 and 4 touchdowns. I mean, since being held to 17 points in that loss to Plano West, they've averaged almost 51 points per game, and they've scored at least 38 in 5 straight games. I mean, so that's the floor for this team right now is 38 points, and that was against Marcus, who as the rest of the district schedule panned out. You kind of see that Marcus is one of the better defenses in the area, and even then, that was a game. I mean, that was a game in the second half. Louisville had a lead for a bit. That was the first time Marcus has trailed all season in the second half of the ball game. It came against Louisville. Again, so they've scored at least 38 in 5 straight games. For comparison's sake, McKinney Boyd's offense has scored 38 just once this season, and it was against Braswell. Like you said, Devin, the defense starting to turn a corner there. It's that was a unit that with as much of a spotlight as was on the offense to start the season, you weren't really sure what to make of if Louisville was just going to have to win every game, 48-45 and whatnot, because that's defense. It's a defense that's really young, and they had a lot of success at the sub-varsity levels, so it was a unit that kind of needed to, kind of a bit of a baptism by fire to start with some of the offenses that they faced to begin the year, with Rockwall Heath and Arlington Lamar. But then, you've seen, especially in the secondary with some of their young guys, underclassmen like Jaden Hardy, Cameron Jenkins, it's a unit that has really started to kind of find its footing there. And, you mentioned just the opponents that they played down the stretch, Devin, like those were all teams that were contending for playoff spots. So it wasn't like there was any hiccup there late in the season. It's a unit that, it lends a little bit of clarity to the fact that these defensive numbers might be, sustainable a bit, for as long as Louisville's kicking around in the playoffs. So that's kind of a look at the Farmers and where they're at. As far as just kind of some storylines coming into this one, David, you alluded to this, but on McKinney Boyd's side, I mean, you look at that Plano West game is like, okay, well, I mean, what can we do to replicate that? Because that is really the only time that anyone has made that Louisville offense look mortal for a full 4 quarters. And again, how much of that version of Louisville even exists anymore? Because like I said, since then, even despite playing great defenses like Marcus and Coppell, they've had no trouble scoring. So, but if you're Boyd, and there is something though to draw from, if you think back to that matchup, that district opener, what do you recall about that one, David? As far as that performance from Plano West, what were they able to do to slow down Louisville, and what sort of strategy, I guess, can Boyd try to replicate this Friday?
I just saw the numbers on paper. I actually wasn't there in person.
I was, but I want you to talk.
Oh, okay. From what I recall, it was the fact that Plano West took away Taylor Green's first read. Mm-hmm. A lot of high school quarterbacks, they like to look at their first read, go to there. But, they forced the Taylor Green to hold the ball a lot longer than what he did, force some indecision. Mm-hmm. And, it didn't get the numbers that he wanted to. It made some I think he probably, didn't throw as many yards as he wanted to. So I think that's the key for them. If you're Boyd, you got to play disciplined defense against this team right here. You got to tackle. You just can't let the receivers get open. You got to have good communication. Mm-hmm. So I feel like if they can look at the film and see, the discipline that Plano West played with, McKinney Boyd has a chance to win this game. Yeah,
the one thing that West was really, really successful in doing, in addition to making Green really have to think a bit, more than he's accustomed to. They took away the big play, and after that first drive, Damian Martinez, he still got his, on the ground. But as far as that passing game went, they had 68 passing yards in their opening drive at just 74 the rest of the ball game. Again, like Isaiah Stevens, he finished with 5 for 96, but no other receiver had more than than 25 receiving yards. And a lot of that was because Plano just did a good job keeping everything in front of them. They didn't let them get much as far as yards after the catch. And yeah, I mean, it was about it's the only time all season that a team has really been able to do that over the course of 4 quarters. You can have success for a series or two, but eventually the levee breaks, and Louisville's able to get up to up in the mid 40s and whatnot. But yeah, that Plano West performance certainly something that McKinney Boyd will try to replicate. Honestly, though, as far as Boyd's defense goes, and this is kind of where the whole aspect of complementary football comes into play, is that they're going to need some help from the offense. The offense has to be able to sustain drives in this, because you've seen, like we mentioned, like there were moments earlier on when they faced other elite offenses like Allen and Guyer. They were great for 2 quarters, 3 quarters, and then all hell broke loose in the 4th quarter. And in the case of the Allen game, they scored 21 points in the 4th quarter. In the case of the Guyer game, they scored 23. So, and that's what that tells me is that that's a defense that's starting to get a little tired. So that's where I think it's the onus will kind of be on that offense then to sustain drives and at least give the defense a chance to still have its gas for the 4th quarter. Is there anything about this game particularly that jumps out to you, Devin, as far as some sort of subplot that you're interested in?
We've touched on most of the thing. You mentioned the time of possession. I also, I think Boyd needs to win the turnover margin.
No doubt.
They need that defense not to put too much pressure on that defense. We've already asked them to slow down Louisville. Now you're asking them to go out there and score a pick 6 or whatever. But no, I do think that Boyd needs to, because if you win the turnover margin, that means they're taking care of the ball on offense also. Mm-hmm. But their defense needs to make a couple of big plays. I think it will be interesting if they can keep that first quarter is going to be key. Because if Louisville gets out and they have to start playing catch up, then this game could turn into a blowout real quick. But if they can hang around, Boyd's played 5 games that have been decided by 7 points or less. Mm-hmm. Now they're 2-3, but the experience of having been through those. Whereas Louisville's closest game this season was 10-point margin.
And it was that loss against Plano West.
And I know some of those games were close in the 4th quarter, so point spread doesn't tell you everything. But you got a Boyd that's a team that's gone down to the wire with one play kind of determining wins and losses, and a Louisville team that hasn't really been in that situation. So, we kind of laid out what Boyd needs to do to make it a game and to get to that to get to that point. I think if they can do that in the 4th quarter, all the things that we've laid out, I mean, they have the experience right there.
As far as a prediction goes, where did you guys fall on this one? How about you, David?
I feel Louisville just has the upper hand on offense. It's going to be tough for McKinney Boyd just to hang its hat on its defense the entire game. They might get a pick 6 or maybe a turnover, and obviously they're not going to allow Louisville to score points on all 10 drives like it did last week.
You'd hope not. Yeah, I'd like to think that but Boyd's defense is shown to be a bit more formidable than that.
But yeah, I feel like Boyd's going to hang around for a little bit, but I feel like it's just to be able to string together some drives. I don't know how well Boyd can do it, and like Devin said, Louisville's defense is rounding into form, especially with all the younger players that they have. Mm-hmm. So I feel like Louisville's going to win this game.
How about you, Devin? Are you in concert with David? Where did you fall on this one?
Well, good news to McKinney Boyd fans, because I picked Louisville, and if you have any idea of my history of picking McKinney ISD football games, that means that more often than not, I am totally wrong on this. No, I just the firepower that Louisville has. It's hard to see them being held under 30, even if Boyd's defense plays well, and I just don't know if Boyd has the firepower to keep pace with that.
With Boyd, I mean, they really have to do play like their fate rests on scoring an absolute season high in points per game. I mean, we talked about the need to sustain drives, to finish drives, and I mean finish drives with touchdowns. If you have to kick a field goal in this game, I feel like that's already just a concession right there. I mean, it's just because you're just not going to win a game against an offense the caliber of Louisville's if you're settling for 3 instead of 7. So, I mean, I think, a lot of the same things that kind of worked in their favor against Braswell. That's a game as far as the offense goes, what they could also try to approximate, because in addition to, they won that game by 30, so it was as convincing as it was. It wasn't just the defense that showed out, but the offense had a season high 42 points, and they did that through field position and then time of possession. But all that being said, especially when you factor in the strides that Louisville's defense has made, for all the question marks that might have surrounded that unit at the start of the season, the fact that they were able to slow down playoff caliber offenses like Coppell, like Hebron, and Flower Mound late in the season, I think that kind of bodes well for their chances in this one. I mean, I feel like again, there's a floor to what the offense is going to do, but even then, I think that floor might be higher than Boyd's ceiling in this matchup. So I side with Louisville to get the win in this one. So we will see a clean sweep for the Louisville Farmers, though, at least according to the three of us in our game of the week. Louisville versus McKinney Boyd, Friday 7:00 out at Max Goldsmith Stadium in Louisville in a Class 6A Division I by district matchup. So, all right, guys, as per usual, then let's bat around a few of the other games that were up for consideration for game of the week. Devin, we got a couple games in your neck of the woods that are of intrigue, including one out at Homer B. Johnson Stadium out in Garland, Friday 7:00 between Sachse and Skyline. This game was an absolute pain for me to pick, so I will turn it over to you, man. Just kind of break down what you see in this one. Ultimately, where did you fall on this matchup?
It's two teams that obviously are not exactly trending the way that they would have hoped to going into the playoffs.
Not particularly so.
Sachse, a team that I probably had a chance to see more than anybody else this season, has been just a head-scratcher all season long. They come into this game having lost 4 of their last 5. But the one win they did hit was the one that counted because that was their seeding play-in game against South Garland. They've had some close games in that stretch. They had that 35-33 game to Rowlett. The game with Naaman, even in the finale, was still close for the most part. Again, it's one of those teams that you just. And you look at like last week, they scored 7 points against Naaman Forest, and you sit there and I watch them. I said, how? It just seems like, and they did the same thing against Wiley. Alex Orjai, their quarterback, he's thrown for 1,400 yards. He's nearly rushed for 1,000 yards. He's at 926 and 15 touchdowns. Brian Okoye and Corey Jones, their 2 primary running backs who have basically rushed for over 1,000 yards combined. They're both averaging better than 7 yards a carry. Tyler Williams, Jagger Rowland, Jaden Hunter, Elijah Ames, they've got guys that can catch the ball. They're averaging more than 450 yards a game.
Yeah, everything says this offense should be putting up points like nobody's business.
They just seem to shoot themselves in the foot.
Really?
And it's just, again, you can't really put your finger on it. They've had some inopportune penalties that have taken them out of drives. A couple turnovers here and there, but they're not a real big turnover team. It's just a matter of between the 20s, they're really, really strong, really, really consistent. But it seems like once they get down there into that area, into the red zone, they just haven't been able to find a way to finish. But the potential's there. That's why, if I'm a Sachse fan, I'm really optimistic because their defense has done a good job, for the most part all season long. And I think Skyline might be kind of the perfect first-round opponent for them, just because Skyline's played in a lot of close games, with the exception of Rockwall. Now they didn't have to play Rockwall Heath, which I don't think would have been a close game. They've got the nice close wins. That non-district, they beat McKinney and they beat Keller. Tyler Legacy, that was a solid win early in district play,
no doubt.
But you look at their last 3. The blowout loss to Rockwall. They had a rally from a fourth-quarter deficit against a North Mesquite team that is really just been so depleted this last month because just their depth was so far gone. And then they lose to a Horn team that came in winless in district, 18-7, in a game where their offense didn't generate any points. Their lone points was from a pick 6. So, and this was a Horn team that missed out on the playoffs. So, they're trending kind of in the same direction from a win-loss standpoint as Sachse. I haven't seen some of their highlights. Jalen Robinson's a solid quarterback. Quaydarius Davis and Quaylon Farr in the backfield are solid. But Sachse's done a good job up front against a lot of these teams. Containing it and keeping it close. And I just think that Sachse's it's almost one of those teams where they're kind of due. If you put up that many yards, it's going to translate into points. At some point in time, you would think. And so, no, I took Sachse because, like I say, I just think that the potential is there. I think they're catching an opponent that they match up really well with. And I'm looking for Sachse to march on and live to fight another day.
David, you took Sachse as well.
I did take Sachse. Just the fact that Skyline's just having so much trouble on offense right now, and. You know what? Like the only thing that's that Sachse can't do is just turn the ball over, because this is the same Skyline team that had 5 interceptions in that come from behind win over North Mesquite, I think it was, Devin. Yeah. So if they just don't turn the ball over, this should be a pretty solid win for Sachse.
I picked Skyline, and I really don't have any good reason for it. It's more just like the version of Skyline that existed back in October, I think, is better than anything that Sachse's shown up to this point. And I guess, it's so weird to try to just talk about Sachse in these terms, because of losing 4 out of their last 5. I just don't think either of us would have fathomed they would go through a stretch like this. And I guess the inconsistencies at some point, I've been covering Plano ISD football, so I've seen some offenses that are look the part for 99% of the drive, and then they shoot themselves in the foot, and just after a while that just kind of becomes who you are, so it's, again, I think it is a bit of a coin flip, but by the slimmest of margins, just because, again, I have at least seen a version of Skyline that exists against playoff caliber teams like Legacy, like Mesquite for that matter, who knows, again, it's, to be fair, if that version of that team even exists anymore given what this last month has shown us. But when you have 2 teams that on paper the resumes really don't have a whole lot of difference, that's just kind of the one thing that I can cling to in this one. And without a whole lot of confidence, I took Skyline. So we'll see. That'll probably backfire. It's probably a stupid pick.
You'll still be leading us in the standings regardless.
Yeah, I don't want to lose ground though. Let's see. So then our next game, let's stick right in your wheelhouse, Devin, and let's talk about Poteet, the Poteet Pirates, in this matchup that they have coming up Friday at Mesquite Memorial Stadium. Is it a 7 o'clock kickoff? I know they have a lot of 7:30s out there. It is a 7 o'clock kickoff for this one. A bi-district matchup in 5A Division II against Everman. Talk about this matchup, Devin.
Yeah, this is it's interesting. At Everman team, we don't have a lot of contact with. Until you get down into the playoffs. And a Poteet team that, it seems odd saying this after they play a full season, because they actually did play a full season for the most part. But, it's...
Didn't they technically play more than a full season?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. They had the odd where they got a lot of districts went to no contest. That their 6-5A Division II actually did have forfeits. So on one of those... weeks, Poteet was already awarded a forfeit win, but they were able to squeeze in a non-district game at the same time. So, their record says they played 11 games going into the playoffs. But, it's been kind of a hard – last week was big because they had the big marquee game against South Oak Cliff that kind of everybody had circled as the measuring stick. And they played well but lost that game 27-14. Well, then after that, they had 2 lopsided blowouts. Just shutouts where there was no contest, and then they had a bye, and then they had a forfeit. So we really, since late October, hadn't got to see what Poteet could really do until last week, and then they played Kimball. The 2 teams were tied for second, and of course, the second seed. This is a big deal because of home field that they introduced the last few years. So they came out and just really took it to them. They won that game 40-14, clearly establishing themselves as the second best team in that district. Again, it's hard to project their playoff future because they really haven't played the toughest district slate. Now, you look back at their season opener, they lost to Lake Highlands 49-20. Well, at the time, you kind of go, I don't know if that's. Well, now you look back and go, oh wow, well, that was not
that loss has aged spectacularly.
Yeah, that's not a bad loss at all. Then they had a loss to a very good Midlothian Heritage team. That was the last second replacement, and then to Sock. I like this Poteet team. It's Jalen Police. They have a experienced quarterback back there. He's thrown for almost 1,800 yards, 21 touchdowns. He's a good running threat, rushed for over 500 yards and 7 scores. Xavion Jeans has been kind of their workhorse, but they brought in DeMarcus Taylor, who's also one of their best defensive players, who's averaging over 10 yards a pop on the ground. A bunch of different guys that can catch the ball. Marcel Jackson, Kenan Puckett, Tashad Turner, Charles Bradley. These are all guys who have had big games at different times. And so Police has 4 legitimate options outside. And so they've got that balance. Again, it's kind of hard to say when the game is 48-0 at halftime. Yeah. But again, last week against Kimball, a solid playoff-bound Kimball team, they were able to show off that balance. Just really impressive effort. The defense has been, really good, really since those first couple games against, with Lake Highlands and whatnot. Nick DeVille, Malik Harrison, Stephen Kirk. I mentioned DeMarcus Taylor. These guys are all guys who fly to the ball. I think Poteet has a well-rounded team that, even though I think they're maybe a little bit overlooked, could make a little bit of noise. Again, this is their first year. They've been right there in Division I. This is their first year dropping down to Division II, so this is a new, playoff landscape for them. Mm-hmm. They're taking on an Everman team that we don't see too much of. We know that they're going to be battle-tested. They play in a very, very good district. Yes. Just looking by their numbers, they got a solid quarterback in Eric Calamise. Doesn't seem to make a lot of mistakes. He can run the ball too, and that's kind of where I'm looking in this game as far as the key. It looks like that Everman uses a kind of a group of different running backs. Like I said, Jonathan Wilson, Juan Davis, Joshua Lester. I think according to their website, they've gone for basically 1,700 yards and 17 touchdowns. And you throw in Calamise, and they've gone for over 2,000 yards on the ground. Well, that's the one area Poteet's going to have to focus on, because when they lost to South Oak Cliff in that showdown, they gave up 317 yards on the ground. And Sock averaged 11.3 yards per carry. Now, granted, South Oak Cliff is a very good athletic team, and especially in that ground game. But that's going to be, I think, where Everman is obviously going to look to attack them. And if Poteet can stand firm up there with their front seven and limit that ground game, I think their offense has enough to get the job done. This
was one, though, where both David, you and I picked Everman in this one. Since I just tried wrapping my brain in the pretzel trying to justify my Skyline pick, I'm going to defer to you on this one, since I don't want to do that again, because I think this is another game that is an absolute coin flip.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Where'd you land on?
I'm on the air. This is a toss-up for me, too. I think I saw Everman maybe one time in a scrimmage back in the days. But
is that what you're drawing upon?
The 2012 scrimmage.
Not 100%.
When we start getting into playoff games in schools we don't recognize, then we'll just grasp onto.
But I feel like they're battle-tested in that district that they face. Obviously, Alito and is in their district right there, and I think Timberview's in their district as well, too.
And they played a tough preseason schedule, too.
Yeah. So I feel like this is a team that's been battle-tested. Like you said, Devin, they rely a lot on their ground game, and you're going to have to face not one back but several different backs to try to stop. So, how is Poteet's defense going to be able to handle that?
That's strength in numbers. So, David, you and I picked Everman, Devin rolling with Poteet, and what should be a good matchup over in Class 5A Division II to kick off the postseason. Got a couple 6A matchups to close this one out, including one, David, Saturday, out at C.H. Collins Stadium in Denton. This is 1 o'clock?
1 p.m., yep.
1 p.m. A meeting between Coppell and Denton Guyer, the reigning 6A Division II runner-up, against a Coppell team making a return to the playoffs after a one-year hiatus. David, how you feeling about this one for the Cowboys? And just talk a little bit about this matchup and where you're leaning.
Maybe some people outside the program aren't feeling good about this, but I actually am.
Ooh. Way to tip your hand on that pick right there.
I am. Yeah. I guess you already tipped the hand. I guess you know who I'm picking after you just said that. So, this is a Coppell team. They're back in the playoffs. It feels like, they got so much talent to be able to keep up with Guyer, especially on the offensive side of the ball right there. And this is a team that, like a couple weeks ago, we weren't really sure about just because they had a COVID shutdown because they completely closed the high school for a week.
For sure.
So, and they couldn't even practice at their high school. And the game before Louisville, they only had 1 day of practice, and then they went to lose, I think, 39-14.
Yeah.
So, but the last 2 weeks, they've really gotten a playoff mode. Ron Walker 2 weeks ago against Plano East threw for 6 touchdown passes right there. And then last week, Jason Nagu, their senior running back, he's been their workhorse the entire season in the running game. All he did last week against Flower Mound, in a game that Coppell had to win to get in the playoffs, not have to worry about any of the what-ifs right there, he rushed for 275 yards and 3 touchdowns.
That's good.
That's not a bad outing. And it's a game that Coppell is overall as a team rushed for 383 yards. And the way that Coppell runs the ball, it could be, an advantage against Guyer. Because, you look at Guyer, I don't know if you were there for Guyer against Allen.
No, I was.
Yeah. So, you saw what Allen's rush offense did against Guyer's defense right there. They torched him. So, this is a game that and they had 16 yards per carry that Allen did in that game. So, if Coppell's offensive line, they've had really good offensive line this year. If they can, generate the same kind of totals that Nagu did last week against Flower Mound, I mean, they've got a chance to, do some good things against Guyer. And obviously for Coppell, their wide receiver, KJ Liggins, actually played for Guyer last year, but now he's back at Coppell. So that's another storyline going into this game as well, too. And all he's done this year is caught for almost 900 receiving yards and 13 touchdowns. So, I mean, that's going to be interesting to see, what they do against him. Now, on Denton Guyer's side of the things, they're back in the playoffs after going all the way to the state championship game last year. And unfortunately, in that game, quarterback Eli Stowers, a Texas A&M pledge, he got injured in that game. So you're just interesting to see, all the motivation that he has to,
especially being a senior, to go out like this. Yeah.
So, I mean, and this is a Denton Guyer team that's very physical, runs the ball very well. Not only with Stowers, but Byron Phillips as well, too, who's rushed for 923 yards and 16 touchdowns on the year. So, I mean, this is a Coppell defense that's going to have its work cut out for them. I mean, the thing they have to do is they got to tackle against these guys. So, And obviously Stowers, he can throw the ball too. 1678 through the air, 10 touchdowns. He has 8 different receivers with at least 100 yards receiving. His main receiver is Grayson O'Bara. He has 20 receptions for 427 yards, and he's averaging 21.4 yards per reception. So I mean, you got to kind of keep your eyes out on the field if you're Coppell's defense. And defensively, they've got. Guyer's got some good guys up front right there with defensive end Cooper Lance, who's a Baylor commit. He's 5 sacks on the year, 62 tackles. And then junior defensive tackle Rowan Briggs, he's got 48 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, and 4 sacks. So they kind of spread the wealth there on defense with Guyer. So this is a game that, it's going to be interesting on both sides of the ball. I think it's more evenly matched up than what people are playing out to be. Obviously, a big thing for Guyer is that they don't have Deuce Harmon, their Texas A&M commit. He's out for the rest of the season with a lower back injury. So, I mean, that's like one less person in the defense that Coppell has to worry about. Obviously, the big thing, like strategy for both of these teams, is that you got to get out to fast starts.
Absolutely.
Both of these teams they've had struggles, getting out to fast starts. Guyer's had its slow starts as well, too. I mean, you take a look at the McKinney Boyd game, and then you take a look at the Prosper game when they fell behind by double digits. And then, fortunately, against Prosper, they won on an Eli Stowers touchdown run with no time left.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're Coppell, and you're seeing that Guyer's falling behind, in these games right here, hey, if we come out strong, we got a chance to win this game. Because, Guyer comes out to some slow starts.
Do you think they can win this game?
I actually picked them to win this game.
There you go.
I picked Coppell to win this game. So I'm going to take Coppell. I'm going with the Cowboys this week.
How about you, Devin? Where'd you lean on this one?
Guyer. I agree. Coppell's going to have a shot. Coppell's going to score.
I think this could be a close game.
I just think Guyer having the experience of last year and making it all the way to the state title game, and something I brought up last year, the Rodney Webb effect.
Absolutely.
Here's we.
I mentioned the Rodney Webb factor.
I said it last year. The guy takes Royce City, his first head coaching job, to a regional final, moves over to Mesquite Horn, takes them to a regional final, moves over to Rockwall, takes them to a regional final, then last year to the state semifinals. He wins in the playoffs
for sure.
And it could be a perfect mix. It's his first year at Guyer. But, again, I think that experience of having been there, having so many of those key guys back in the fold, I think, Guyer's going to come out and not just win. I think Guyer's going to be a team that we're talking about potentially, 3-4 weeks down the road.
With Webb in his 7 seasons at Rockwall, he advanced to at least the second round 6 times. And again, this is a guy who the last memory that folks have of him coaching in the playoffs included defeating Allen, which only 4 coaches in the state can say that they've done that since October of 2012. And I get it. Guyer has, like I said, I think Coppell makes this a game because, again, I do think there is a path to victory that potent rushing offenses like Allen, like Denton Ryan have been able to capitalize on with this team. But, again, I kind of just go with the pedigree and, again, just the track record of a coach who I know is going to coach this team up and take the requisite chances necessary if his team is facing any adversity to win these sort of high-stakes situations. And, with Coppell, just haven't done that just yet with this current iteration. So I sided with Guyer as well. So let's close this out then with a look at another game between these two districts, 6-6A and 5-6A. And this one also on Saturday. This one kicks off at noon from Marauder Stadium in Flower Mound, a meeting between Marcus and Prosper. Ooh, this is a juicy matchup. Basically, like we outlined on Monday's podcast, the storyline of this one is pretty simple. The entire area right now is on Garrett Nussmeier watch. If you're a Marcus fan, you are crossing your fingers that by somehow, some way, he's able to suit up and give it a go despite suffering a hand injury to his non-throwing hand at that, in their game last week against Plano East. It's, like we mentioned on Monday's podcast, if they do have to dig down the depth chart, you have Jackson Warren, who did get some experience in mop-up duty. Again, obviously that's, one thing playing in the fourth quarter against, tired defenses is not the same as playing against what's been statistically one of the better defenses in the Metroplex in Prosper. But again, he does have a litany of skill position threats around him. J. Michael Sturdivant, Dallas Dudley, Tyler Schott at wide receiver, Gabe Espinoza in the backfield at running back. So, listen, he doesn't have to do a ton per se, or at least, that should be Marcus's hope that if he does have to get the start, that, they will try to make it as simple on him as possible. Now, how accommodating Prosper will be for that is another story, because Prosper's defense has certainly shown well in some pretty high-stakes opposition up to this point. Again, that loss to Braswell is forever going to be a bit of a head-scratcher, how a team that was able to, that for all intents and purposes probably should have beat Guyer, and you can make a case should have beat Allen, that they would, get hammered by 17 to a Braswell team that missed out on the postseason. But that's just the kind of district that 5-6A was this year. And then, they were playing in an absolute kitchen sink type of game against McKinney Boyd and won that game by 1 point. So in some ways, Prosper's been a very, very difficult team to figure out. But man, this is such an X factor, though, if Nussmeier is unable to go. If he is able to go, what percentage is he at? Does the hand injury, does that affect his style of play? As far as his ability to, make the same types of plays outside of the pocket, those off-schedule throws that he's become so noted for. It's a really, really tricky matchup that just got all the more cloudier with the with this injury to the Marcus quarterback, and so much so that I'm picking Prosper. And this is another game that I have very little confidence in this prediction. But I already thought this was going to be a really difficult matchup for them, even if both teams were at full strength. Just knowing the ceiling that this Prosper team is capable of reaching, and it's just there's been something. It's those games against those middle rung teams like the Braswells and the Boyds that have been a bit of a head scratchers. But that when pressed against the best teams that they've seen all season, they're going to bring it. And it might be just a team that plays to the level of its competition, But, they started off, they kind of announced their presence at the start of the year with a big road win against a state-ranked Euless Trinity team that has certainly aged quite well with what Trinity has done for the remainder of its schedule. And like we just mentioned, the way that they were able to push Guyer and Allen, I think that means something. So, we'll see what happens behind center for Marcus, but it's not a pick that I make with much confidence, but give me the Eagles. Let's see who wants to make their pick on this one to round this out. Go for it, David.
Well, since you picked Prosper, you're going to have somebody who's going to back you up right here.
There you go.
So, it's not only just the quarterback factor in this game, with Nussmeier, his status we're not sure of. Mm-hmm. You got to take a look at Prosper's defense.
Yeah.
Up front with Aiden Ciano, Herman Lee.
Their linebackers are awesome.
Yeah. and the way that, even if Nussmeier plays, the way that they're able to, bring pressure towards the quarterback right there, they could give him a handful right there.
Because they're not going to hold back, even if he is, they're not going to take it easy on him and try to avoid doing anything to that hand.
Of course not. Yeah. It's the playoffs. Why should they hold back? So I feel like, Prosper with that, and the fact that they've been in a lot of, games, battle-tested games against Guyer and Allen. This is this is going to be a game, I feel like, just based on that experience right here, where Marcus has been in some blowouts right here, I feel like the factor of being in close games is going to help Prosper a lot.
Yeah. Prosper has been in its share of close games, to be sure. So, yeah, David, you and I took Prosper. Devin, you took Marcus. We actually had quite a bit of dissension on this week's picket line, guys. That's awesome. After last week, I think we had one game that was different of the 10 that we picked. And you got that right, David, so fair play to you. David went 10-0 last week. David catching fire late in the season on the picket line.
But I only picked up one game on you guys.
Yeah, that is right. But you know what? You still went 10-0, man. You got to pick the games right in the first place. So fair play to you on that so far. So quickly, before we round things out, let's go over the rest of our picks on the picket line. The 5 other games that were up for consideration this week in the first round of the playoffs. Allen versus Plano West in Class 6A Division I action. We all foresee the Eagles getting off to a hot start. The state's number 4 ranked team. We all picked Allen to beat Plano West. Let's see, and then in Class 5A Division II, a matchup between 2 stout districts. Frisco draws Royce City. Frisco playing its first game in a couple weeks, so curious to see if there's any sort of hiccup there in their efficiency out of the gates. Not enough to deter any of us, though, from picking them from picking them to win this one. We all foresee the Frisco Raccoons advancing in a matchup against Royce City. We actually dipped outside, so I'll do this every now and then for the picket line. Once we start getting deep in the playoffs, we'll kind of look if there's, maybe not the most compelling, options elsewhere. We'll kind of dip outside of our coverage area and pick some of the smaller schools and give you guys a little bit of test as far as getting acquainted with some schools that we don't really get a whole chance to talk about. So I put Gunner versus Canadian on the picket line this week in a matchup in the 3A Division II bracket, a state semifinal. I believe they're number 1 and number 2 in the state. We all see Canadian getting the win in that one. Let's see, then we also have over in Class 5A Division I, a bi-district matchup between McKinney North and Magnolia. We all like Magnolia to get the win there over the Bulldogs. And then let's see, we close out then with another matchup that is off the beaten path, a 2A Division I semifinal between Shiner and Timpson. A little bit of dissension in this one. Devin, you and I going with Shiner. David going with Timpson. You Timpson homer, you. So then let's see.
Been on the bandwagon a long time. Can't tip off now.
So that is, that's a look at where we're at with our picks for some of the other marquee games in our coverage area and 2 that aren't in our coverage area for this first week of the playoffs in 5A and 6A. As far as our schedules go, Devin, what are you looking at for the rest of the week?
Good question. Assuming I can jump through all the necessary hoops, I'm going to be out in Dallas for Frisco Independence and Woodrow Wilson tomorrow night. I'll be in Mesquite as Poteet takes on Everman on Saturday, and then potentially, seeing how my own life is going on Saturday, I may try to make it out to Birdville for TAPS state semifinals.
Ooh.
Yes, as Dallas Christian continues their pursuit of state title number 9.
Okay, how about you, David? What you got for the rest of the week?
I only got one game on my docket this week, and that's going to be Saturday afternoon at C.H. Collins Athletics Complex between Coppell and Denton Guyer.
For me, I will also have a one-game week. As far as football goes, I'll be out at Allen's Eagles Stadium on Friday for a matchup between Allen and Plano West. Looking to maybe get a chance to swing by for that Prosper Marcus game on Saturday, but volleyball gets the nod, and I'll be out at the state championship games in Garland to watch Lovejoy gun for its 8th state championship. Those games are at noon, the same time as Prosper and Marcus. So we have Justin Thomas, our old Star Local Media alumni, out there to cover Marcus and Prosper on Saturday. So yes, that is a look at what is in store for us this week. And yeah, guys, that'll do it for this episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. We'll be back on Monday to break down all the fascinating happenings from the first round. So until then, folks, you enjoy the rest of your week, and we will talk to y'all later.